Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Cocktail with Dave. It is the first ever live rendition of Cocktails Code and Conversation. And it plays over the music here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, today was an interesting day, and it was one in which I wanted to, one in which I had planned this to go a little differently. So when I originally came up with this idea to do the live version of the podcast, I had some topics that I kind of researched and written some notes and wanted to talk about, specifically, diversity and inclusion, and really kind of dive into deeper detail on some of the thoughts that I had about it, as well as giving back to the community. It was some conversations that I'd had over the past week that I thought would be really good for the podcast. And then, kind of life happened, and I wanted to, or decided to shift the topic of conversation a little bit to what's been going on in the news recently, um, with the the incident with George Floyd, which really what you want to call it is a murder by, yet again, police of an African American male. And you combine that with Ahmaud Arbery, and you just keep going back. And this is something that just continues to plague our society. And so when I started to think about it, um, you know, diversity and inclusion in any kind of space, in the tech space, means nothing if we can't get past this real issue that we have in this country of being able to see each other as human beings. And it's something that has plagued this country for centuries. And as much as we like to paint pictures over it, or um, try and belittle it, or make it seem like it's things that don't really affect us, it does. And I think it limits the effect that we can have together as a country. And specifically for this, this always hits hard. And I won't try to speak to, or on behalf of every single person of color. I even go deeper than that, every single Black person. I won't do that. I'll speak on behalf of me, and what this does, feelings that I get every time that I see this. It's a constant reminder that my existence as an African American male in this country is at risk every single time I step outside my door, every single time. And it's a slap in the face to the progress that we have made and trying to progress as a people to where we feel like we're worth nothing, that our lives just don't matter. And of course, obviously, it causes anger, it causes frustration. I've seen a lot of lashing out from a lot of my friends, from a lot of people that I follow, and it's understandable in times like this. And there should be room for expression to do that. But one of the things that I think it's imperative for us to do is to actually start having these conversations and actually start taking steps to make sure that this ceases. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not saying that we can fix it overnight. I'm not saying we could fix it tomorrow, but or even 10 years from now, whether or not it will ever get fixed in my lifetime. But what I am saying is it's time for us to stop sitting on the sideline and waiting for something else to happen, not getting to a mode to where we feel like, oh, it's just another thing that's happened, not just life in this country. It's up to us in this generation to make sure that it changes from whatever steps that we need to take. And in times like this, I know people get you know the feelings of rage, the feelings of anger, start to to well up in you. Like I can definitely say that, it's not something that, when I see that, I don't feel angry, that I don't want to lash out at everyone. But I try my best to kind of take everything in, and then start to kind of really think about it and process it and say, okay, but what are some steps that I can take forward, to ensure that there's change. And the first thing that I thought about was it has to start with our local communities. So we have to have voices in our own community and work with the people across from us in order to make change, right? I think sometimes when we look at this, um, we get outraged and we want to take it all the way to the top, and we're screaming for somebody up top to fix something, whether it's a senator or congressman or whatever. And this isn't going to fix itself until we decide that we want to make the change, and we do that in our own communities. And I'm not saying that we haven't done that, we have, and I think it's cause for more. This will only stop when more of us get off the sidelines, and I will be the first one to admit that that includes me as well, right? I've watched from afar. I've been disgusted. I've had conversations about it, but I haven't gotten involved as much as I should have in my community to make sure that I understand, and I'm taking steps in my own community to make sure that the relations between the community and the people that serve that community are understood, right? When I look at this, this really all comes down to a disconnect in the actual word community. We've lost in this country the ability to really be a community and thrive together despite whatever our differences are. And when you have a community that understand each other, that's talking to each other, that's communicating with each other, then the people that serve that community, from the representatives on the district council to the police officers, when they live and are in that community, that creates the connection we need to serve that community. Now, granted, we also have to be understand that there are just some people in this world that just don't respect that. We have people in this world that just don't like other people for the color of their skin or where they come from or how they talk or whatever. And it is up to all of us to make sure that we stand to make sure that those voices are I don't want to say silenced. I mean, I do want to say silence, but I realize that silence in those voices is not the way. That is a very slippery slope, because to push an agenda, any agenda on any other person, is not what we want. But we want to make sure that the rest of the voices are there to combat those voices that feel like anybody in this world is inferior based on their background. Right. And eventually we can get to a point where we can talk about those, and maybe we never convert those people, but we make sure that they're not the majority voice. And this is something that I think we have to take the steps by doing that, by again, you know, having these conversations. First, I would say this to most people out there, like, to people who are allies of Black people, right? If you feel like, hey, I'm outraged by this, but I don't really know what to say to my Black friends or family members, just I would say, you know, room to express and room to be frustrated and be angry, and understand that in a moment it may be geared towards you, but that's not the root of the problem, right? If you're truly an ally, you have to give room for people to be able to express themselves, especially in times of this, because it's too traumatic for people to look at and see. And I think it's important for all of us to have a platform where we feel like we can express ourselves and get that out, because holding it in only leads to bottling up and only leads to anger, and we know that anger is not going to solve this. So obviously my thoughts, my prayers go out to George Floyd's family, and to all the people there in Minnesota. I've seen the protests, I've seen the tear gas being used and things of that nature, and again, it just continues to add on and pile on and pile on. We continue to deal with this, and I feel like there is a breaking point coming, and we need to define what that point is. I saw a lot of references to Malcolm X today. I saw some people post some YouTube videos of Malcolm, an interview that he did, and although I didn't look through all of them, I always think it's fascinating when people go to Malcolm. And Malcolm X was one of the leaders that I studied a lot as a kid, and even when I got into college, because I always admired his story and his journey of where he went. And I think that obviously there was the movie Malcolm X that was fantastic that a lot of people love, but I think what's kind of skipped over, we like to glorify the radical part of Malcolm X, where he started. But it's towards the end of his unfortunately short life, that I thought was the most powerful, when Malcolm made that trip to really understand what Islam was all about. And when he came back, and being Muslim was all about, when he came back, he realized that while it was still about, hey, we need to make sure that our people have a voice and have a stance, and we need to do what's right for us. At the same time, um, I can get nothing done in isolation. I have to be able to find a way to reach across and work with whoever's willing to help to create that. Because as much as, you know, I want to get angry, I want to say, just forget it. Like I just, I want to isolate every black person in the world to protect them and keep them safe and say we should just completely have our own. I also realize that in order to progress as a overall people, we're going to need to figure out a way to work and get past those differences. And so that's something that, you know, we all need to strive to. And I think when it comes to Malcolm X, that I think people tend to skip over. Like we love the part where he was defiant, where he was, by any means necessary, and he was motivating people because at that time it was needed, right? Black people needed to understand and look at themselves in the mirror and feel a sense of confidence and feel that they were worth something. And these times, these past couple of years to seeing this, I feel like it's a call back to that, right? That although we've progressed in many ways with civil rights and things of that nature, there is this constant reminder that we feel like our lives aren't worth anything, that we can only get so far. And I think it's times like this where we need that constant reminder that we need to look in the mirror and realize that we are people and that we are worth something and that our lives do matter. That as many times as they will try to sensationalize it and murder us in the streets and continue to try to make us feel like we're inferior, it's now more than ever that we have to have the stance that we're not, and understand that we have confidence that together as a people that we are more than what they will make us out to be. And we have to be careful in doing that, and that while we must uplift ourselves, we also can't isolate ourselves. So it's been a very trying 24 hours, for a lot of people, obviously, as we kind of look at this. And, I really wanted to come and do this podcast and try and find ways to be, uplifting and talk about it in ways that we can find answers and solutions. I don't like to be the guy that points something out and go, hey, like, here's a problem, but I don't have a solution. And so I thought about even avoiding talking about it, but I was like, no, I think it needs to be talked about because it's important. It leads us to things that we need to be able to address and talk about openly and freely so we can continue to find our way to heal, but then come together and go forward. So, yeah, I'm not coming on here proclaiming to know that I have the solution. I can say this: I will no longer be silent. I will, make sure that in the communities that I live in, that I'm working to make sure that I understand how that community is being served and having a voice on what's going on in my community. And I think that's the first best step that we can take, is making sure in our own communities that we are involved and we know what's going on, and we're making, strides to have this outreach so we can get better connected with the people that are supposed to serve this community, right? And that's something else that I think, we've lost, in the fact that, if for Black people, we've always had this issue, is that, the police have never served us as community members. They've been there to enforce and intimidate. And that was never the intention of a police force. They're supposed to be there for the community, to serve the community, to make sure that the laws of the community that have been written are enforced, to be officers really of the community. And that's never really been the case for us. And again, so let me back up. Sorry, I'm painting a broad picture because I can't speak for every single Black person. I'll say in my lifetime, that's never really been the case. I grew up in cities watching police officers where I never felt like they were part of the community. I just felt like they were the boogeyman. They were the person that was coming to, take someone to jail, or, shoot someone, or they were just always the bad guy. And I think that is, I would say that a lot of us that have grown up in the African American community tend to have that view of the police, and that's something that I don't think we can continue to have. We've got to change that in order to kind of make these next steps to get any kind of progress. And that's not easy, right? A lot of us have scars from dealing with the police. I can tell you, I think you could probably pull over, or pull over is a bad term, but you could probably, pull aside any African American male, heck, over the age of 15, and they would have a story of an interaction with a police officer where they were scared for their life, or that went away, that totally didn't need to go that way because the other person felt threatened, by, this person, because of the color of their skin, being a male. Where, African American males are always seen more violent than they need to be. You just gonna interrupt the pod? That's what you're gonna do, right? Okay. All right. See, this is what happens. People just interrupt your live podcast. Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks. So with that interlude, the cocktail today is an old fashioned. Um, I have two of them now, so let me try this one. It's actually not bad. So let's look at some of the comments. Yes, Luana, they should protect and serve all people. Absolutely. Um, and that's one of the things that we definitely need to remind our local communities of, that's their model. That's what they're there for. CJ, what's going on? I see you. So kind of jumped right into it. So let me back up and kind of explain the setup we got here. So obviously going live to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Appreciate everybody that's jumping in the comments. Also live on Instagram Live. So all my Instagram users, what's up? What's going on? Now, unfortunately, the platform that I use in, like, Instagram doesn't have a live API, so I kind of have to do both. So if you see me switching views over here, it's just to make sure that I'm also addressing my people out there on Instagram Live. So, but definitely, wanted to get back to that, protecting and serve all people. Like, I think that's something that we really need to pick up that mantle and work with our local communities to understand it. And it goes back to me, I think this comes back to, paying attention and being involved in what goes on in our communities from the election standpoint, right? And I'm talking about the local elections, right? I know we tend to get caught up in the bigger elections and what's going on with the presidency, which is important. Now, I'm not saying that it's not important, more in more ways than ever come up this election period, right? But, at the end of the day, what affects you most is the local policies that's going on in your neighborhood, right? What's going on in your city, in your county, in your state. And those are the elections that have the most effect on your life. And that's where, I think we need to do a better job of getting more involved in understanding. And again, I'll be the first to admit, I'm not coming out here and pointing fingers and saying we all need to do better, because I'm going to point them right back at me. I need to do better, myself. And that's something that, I've, especially this year, pulled on myself to make sure that I get more involved and understand what's going on with my local community, understanding that I'm being a representative, even if it's just me, if I'm the only one that looks like me, making sure that I'm showing up at the meetings and having a say about what's going on in the community. And I think that's where we have to start. We have to start making sure that the community understands what our needs are. Um, so it's definitely, it's a trying time, and it's one to where, I would implore people to definitely, like, you know e- express your frustration, express your anger, but then turn that into something going forward, right? Let's not just make it another hashtag or another post just to say whatever. Let's turn it into an action. Let's turn it into discussions that we have with our neighbors, with our friends, and start to get out and, make these changes. And it's, my feeling is it's not going to be for this generation, for people, my age. Like, I'm in the elder millennial. I'm still not gonna say my age number, 'cause I don't like the fact that it's there. Whatever. On the elder millennial side, like, it's for the generation behind us, right? It's for the sons, the daughters, the nephews, the nieces. Um, we have to show them a path of change and resistance that works. I think we've lost so much of that in the African American community, specifically, that we need to get back to that activism and show them the way to go and make change. And it can't be through anger, it can't be through violence, um, because violence only begets violence, and that won't solve long-term issues. That will just continue to create division, and that's not what we need. We need to find a way to unify. Again, I don't know how we do it. I'm not saying that it's going to happen overnight, but that's always got to be, the shining light that we're looking for. Is at the end of the day, we just want to be unified, right? We all want to be respected. We all want to be uh, loved. We all want to feel safe and confident in who we are, and not feeling like any part of us is inferior at any time. And we first have to get, as communities, that self love, and then that love for one another. So, um, yeah, definitely crazy times. And man, it's definitely, it's rough to see. And I'm, staying hopeful and optimistic that, one day before I leave this earth, um, that these times and these moments will be ones that I talk about like it's ancient history. Like there was a time when this was how, people were looked at. There was a time when this wasn't a safe thing to do, right? Um, Stay optimistic that we'll get to a point that it'll be different. So take a sip on that one. But we're gonna move. I'm gonna move on and kind of bridge that into one of the main topics and themes that I've been talking about on the podcast, which is diversity and inclusion, right? And um, you know, getting there in the workplace and creating an environment where people feel safe and included is definitely a challenge. And I think it's one that most companies, um, if I'm honest, I think they're ignorant to, right? I think they looked at this and said that it's a numbers problem, or that we need to come up with some kind of incentive program to make this easier. One of the things that really stuck out to me is lately the NFL has been looking at revamping what they call the Rooney Rule. So if you're not a fan of the National Football League, at one point, I can't remember if it was Arthur Rooney or Dan Rooney, but one of the Rooneys, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, came forth with a rule that said for the NFL when you're hiring, and I want to say this was, I know it's for head coaches. I'm not sure if it's all for the assistant coaches as well. But if you're looking to interview for head coach, that you have to interview a minority first, or make sure that before you do the hire, have to make sure that a minority was interviewed. And so that rule was instituted. I think it was about, let's call it 5 or 6 years ago, and you saw some decent results, better results than they had before. But the last couple of years it's regressed, and they were, offering, saying that something needed to change. So they wanted to make changes to that rule, and one of the changes that was proposed, and I don't know if this was put into place, but that there would be like a draft pick compensation for if you made a minority hire. And when I heard this, I absolutely, to be honest, just lost my shit. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've freaking heard. It was almost an F bomb. Give me a little bit more to go with this cocktail, and the F bomb will come out. But I think that that's not the way to go about incentivizing somebody to want to create a diverse workforce, right? Because now what you're doing is saying, hey, hire this person and we'll give you some kind of benefit. And that tends to lead towards the person wanting the benefit more than actually wanting to look at who that person is and making sure that they're a good hire and giving them the opportunity they need to thrive in that organization. Because now you're going to look at it and go, okay, well, if I just make this hire for this minority, then I get this draft pick. And then, hey, if it doesn't work out, whatever, I can fire them in a year, right? That's not creating an environment for that person to actually succeed and do well, right? So we've got to get past this thing that it's a number, that it's a, if we just, hire more, then everything will be okay, right? And the thing that we hear about that is, we hear about pipeline, right? That there's, there's a pipeline problem, that there's not enough there. Specifically, when you look at the NFL, um, the NFL hiring process is very much, I think, um, a representation of the overall hiring process, like in the rest of in the rest of, like, business and organizations. And here's what I mean by that: you look at the NFL; it's a very tight knit family type of hiring process, right? So you hear a lot about the coaching trees. So you have these great coaches that have hired all these assistants, and they have these coaching trees. These assistants go off to get hiring, get head coaching jobs and things of that nature because they come from this tree, right? So you look at Andy Reid, Bill Walsh. All these people have these great coaching trees. It's very much a tight network of individuals. And so what tends to happen is that when you don't have a lot of, pipeline kind of making it up those ranks and getting into those trees, then it becomes very hard to change those numbers. And it's because, and outside looking in, that it seems as if that hiring process is very much relational. Like, hey, we were on staff together over at Tampa Bay like 10 years ago. And now that I've got this head coaching opportunity, I'm going to go pull you in because, we were staff members together, right? And we both worked there, such and such, XYZ coach or whatnot. And it goes down to establishing those relationships. And what that to me really comes down to is it comes down to our bias as individuals of who we want to work with, right? When you have success with something, if you're on a successful team, right, and it's 5 of you and you guys go out and whatever measure of success that you have, you guys you hit every single one of it, then in your mind, you're going to start saying, this is what it takes to be success. And I want to share the success with people that I connect with, that I vibe with. And then when you go out to hire and recreate that, you're going to either A, look to pull back in those same people that you had the success with, or people like them, right? And that's where the bias kicks in, that you don't start to think outside of your own experiences and look at someone else that may have exactly what you're looking for. But in your mind, you have it set that, well, what I want is this, right? And I think you see a lot of that in the NFL, but also what you see is just, the good old boy network, which we've known about, that exists in the NFL for years. It was very interesting when they did the draft online this past year, that the only organization that have both an African-American coach and an African-American GM was Miami. Now, it's interesting to have this when you've got a league that the majority of the actual players are African-American. But when you start to look at, the coaches, the GM positions, you see less than that, right? And so those numbers always, when it's skewed that way, it always makes you think and start to dig. And so I think as the NFL starts to look at that, I don't think that compensation, for hiring a minority is going to be the right way. They've got to go back to understanding the environment that's being created and finding a way to develop their pipeline at the bottom aspect. So when players either retire or people that want to come in to start coming into the coaching ranks, it's got to be welcoming for more minorities to want to step into those ranks, right? And to be an assistant coach, either a wide receivers coach or special teams coach or things of that nature. And there's got to be more of an environment there where people are being invited in to create the pipeline that can come up, right? Pipelines don't get created by themselves. You have to actually want to work it and create that pipeline, right? So, I mean, if we were digging for oil, we're not just going to sit around and go, okay, well, we're just going to wait for oil to pop up. No, we're going to go dig and find different spots and keep looking until we find the pipeline to oil that we're looking for. And so it's one of those things where whenever I look at this and people say it's this big problem, you get what you want to go look for, right? At the end of the day, if you wanted to have a different meal, if you loved pizza, you had pizza every day of the week, and you just woke up one day and said, I'm just tired of pizza, you're gonna go find a different way not to eat pizza. You're gonna go get a hamburger, you're gonna go get something. Like it's there for the people that are looking for it and want to go there. And that's the things that when we start to look at diversity and inclusion, I think it's important that we have to start getting people in places that are looking to actually create the environment that people will thrive in a diverse and inclusive environment, and realizing that those two are completely different things. Diversity is making sure that, you have a different collection of individuals, and also understanding diversity is not just race, it's background, right? It's where people come from. It's not making sure that I'm just hiring Harvard grads or Stanford grads or whatever. It comes down to understanding what is the fundamentals of the team or the structure that I want to build. What are the things that I need to have, the core attributes that I need to have to build that, and then going and finding that, and not biasing yourself based on, well, most of the people that meet these attributes come from MIT or this, that, or whatever. No, it's just going out and finding those attributes. That's how you create the diversity. The inclusion part, I think, is the hardest part, right? And it goes back to what I started this with. It's going to be hard to have it in the business community because we can't fucking do it in real life. We can't look at each other and not make judgments and want to coexist with somebody just because of their differences, right? So if we can't do it in real life, it's going to be really hard for us to do it in business. But I think that that doesn't mean that you give up. That doesn't mean you throw in the towel. Like I think a lot of these businesses are done and just go, oh, well, we're just going to do, whatever. We'll celebrate the different holidays and call that we have a diversity and inclusion program, right? And I think, again, just like on the social side, it's going to take us, more people standing up and stopping being silent and starting to demand more. It's going to be the same when it comes to businesses and diversity and inclusion programs across these enterprises, right? A lot of these companies have employee networks, right? And that's great. That's a great way to start, where, based on whatever, race or sexual preference that you have a group of people there that are working together that you can come and have a safe space. That's awesome. That's the first place to start. After that, it's about making sure that you're creating an environment where it's inclusive, right? Something that I find interesting is that while you look at the numbers, which are still horrible, you look across and say, okay, well, from in the tech world anyway, people coming in, like the numbers kind of slowly get better. For African Americans, it gets above 3 or 4%, right, which is better than the 1 or 2% it was 10 years ago. But the frightening number to me is the back end of that. Like, while there's increasing numbers of coming in, how long are they staying? And then more directly, like, how are they moving up? Well, they're not, right? And again, it comes down to having an environment where people feel like they're inclusive and that they can actually do something there. And that's where it gets hard, right? I talked about it a little bit in the podcast with my cousin Tony. It was just that, that's where it's not, now it's people. Right now, it's a people issue. This isn't, some, program that you can run analytics for. Like, now it comes down to people. We actually have to create environments where people feel empowered and they feel that they have the right at their own company to have ideas and present those ideas, and that they're going to be heard. They're not going to be disrespected. And that means you have to root out the tech bros and, unfortunately, the privileged white males who never grew up in a diverse environment. So all they know is their tech bro frat buddies, right? And so they think that, their little jokes or stuff like that or whatever are inclusive because all their buddies laugh at it, but it's not, right? Or, the chauvinistic males that don't really know how to work with a woman in an environment and not be disrespectful, right? Those are the things that you now have to start addressing, which makes people uncomfortable. Oh, wait, now we've got to start, talking about people's behaviors. And yeah, absolutely. If you want to create an inclusive environment, that's what it's going to mean, right? And I think it's very interesting that we have to tell adults how to act like children. If you think about, children, when you were a kid, you had to be taught to share, maybe most of us had to be taught to share, and some of us struggle with that, I'm not going to call out any names. Okay. But most of us probably struggle with that. But at some point you learned how to share. But the beautiful thing about kids is that they just play, right? As kids, you'll just go out and play, right? You're at the playground, cool. All right, we're going to make a game and we're going to play this and everybody's going to win. We're just going to be playing, right? You see that exclusion and racism is taught. It is not in our nature as human beings to do that. Like, we just want to go and, watch a child and watch them play together, watch children play together. Like, it's not, it's taught for them to look at somebody differently. If they're not taught that, they don't have to happen. Kids will just play and they'll just include and they'll share. It will happen, right? So I think it's hilarious that now as adults, when we should know better, right? We've learned these rules that we have to be, taught that. We have to have programs to teach people how to, hey, don't be a dick in a meeting, right? Hey, be inclusive in a meeting by, making sure that, you're just not doing inside jokes that other people would understand, or making jokes about something that wouldn't be appropriate anywhere else other than your little small group of buddies. Like, the fact that we have to teach people that is astounding to me. But it is something absolutely that we have to do in order to make sure that we're creating environments where, we can get a more diverse workforce and an inclusive workforce. And I think that it will it will pay off for companies. We need to, in this time of technology as it advances, to understand as much as we can about the different type of users that are going to interact with technology, and the different type of ideas that we bring together to the table allow us to create better things, and to create things for our users that they'll enjoy, because they will see that they have been thought about. You're right. They'll see that, hey, somebody thought about how I would use this app. It does these things that I like to do, right? That I find easy, right? That comes from having a diverse set of people who are coming up with those ideas. And so, well, we've got a lot of work to do on that front. I think it comes back to, no longer being silent and being voices. Okay, so let me take a look at some of the comments I've been kind of going on. So we got absolutely CJC 2003. Is that when the CJ, if you're still on, is that when the Rooney Rule was established? That sounds about right. Let's see, Matt. Americans are Americans. That's it. People are so black and white. It's not right. Yeah, I mean, that's true, man. Like, it's look, we have to be able to respect, differences between people and treat people how we want to be treated, but also recognize the differences. It was one of the things, I did a little poll before this, and I was asking people like, hey, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And I had a buddy of mine reach out to me and say, like, one of the things it means no longer hearing like, hey, I don't see color, because that's bullshit. You absolutely do see color. And it's not a bad thing to see me as an African-American male. That's what I am, right? And I'm proud of that. And I am proud of the heritage that we have. It just means respecting that standpoint, right? But then being able to look past that and go, yeah, he's an African-American male, but he's also another human being, right? So he's probably not gonna want to, get killed when he walks outside his house, like I don't want to get killed when he walks outside his house. It's being able to understand and do both, right? That we can see each other as Americans, but we can also see each other, for who we are, right? As, a Latino American or Asian American, or, whatever it is that our background is, it's to be able to see that, respect that of that other person. And, I think it's, I will say this: it's uniquely American, this view that we have, right? I'm not saying that racism does not exist outside of the U.S. It's not the case, but it is viewed differently once you get outside of the States, right? It is. I tend to see, when I talk to and interact with people that are not Americans, they seem to have like a deeper understanding of just human beings in general, right? Like that, just, hey, like we may have differences, but at the end of the day, like, you're just a human, right? They don't get caught up as much as we do in racial background, which is interesting. And obviously, it's because of the history that we have in this country, right? I don't, some historian will come out and fact check, tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think there's very few countries that have like a long sordid history with just racism that we do in this country. And could be wrong with that. Not that big of a historian, and so anybody, if you fact check me, let me know different. But I think that's one of the things that will always, until we address it, will always be our burden in this country, right? Is that we've tried to sweep it under the rug and act like it didn't happen, but the fact is it did, right? On one hand, we pride ourselves on what's written on the Statue of Liberty, and that we prided ourselves on being open. This is, America was a place of dreams where you could come and create the American dream for yourself. But at the same time, we've created this systematic oppression of people, and now, just recently, we've shifted to this thing to where it's, hey, it's just all about us and fuck everybody else, which is, you can't have it both ways, right? So, I think it's, again, very interesting times, and not easy problems to solve. I think more than ever, you know, our generation, we're primed to solve them if we'll just step up and do them, right? We're primed to solve them. We are primed to put, create the platform for the generation behind us to do some amazing things. But we just have to stop being silent about it. So you're absolutely right, Matt. Americans are Americans, but we also need to see the differences in each other and respect them. And I think that's something that we struggle with. So moving on to the next topic. One of the other things that it was an interesting conversation I had over the weekend was about giving back, how to and again it was a conversation specifically about the African American community. So I want to take this time out for all my listeners that aren't African American. This is not. I don't want you to. Okay, a little bit. I do want you to feel uncomfortable because that's good, right? Because when you're not in your comfort zone, that means there's change, and that's good. We all need that. But at the same time, I want you to understand that while I am always going to be pro African American everything, because that's my culture, there's a nature. Most people that know me really well, like I am accepting of everybody, right? As long as you have those basic respect for human life. But a lot of the conversation that I'm going to talk about today is focused on that because that's the community that I know, right? And those are the things that I can speak, freely on. But please, I want you to interact. I want you to ask questions, and I want you to engage, because we need these conversations to make sure that we continue to progress and move forward. So I was had a conversation with a young lady. We were talking about like getting back to the community, right? And how specifically it seems to be hard to, once you make it as an African American person, you want to go back. You want to go back to your community where you're from and give back and help and show that there's a path, there's a way forward. And it's challenging because then you do go back and you're not accepted, right? You're seen as that you've turned your back on the community. And this is a discussion that's happened in the community for a while. It's like, hey, successful people, they make it, they get out of the hood or wherever, and they never come back. And it's one of those things, as we talked about it is hard because whereas you've gotten to a point where you've created some success for yourself, you've done some things, you quote unquote made it, and you want to go back and help others, but at the same time, when you go back and that turns into jealousy or envy, from the same people that you share a community with, you start to kind of get this fear like, hey, I want to protect mine, right? Or you come back and you see that it's now laughed at or frowned upon that you've done these things of success. We have this concept of sellout, in the African American community that we absolutely must get rid of. But one of the things that we talked about is like, so what do we do about that? And one of the things that I said is like, we've got number one for us that quote unquote make it, we've got to get thicker skin. Thicker skin, and we got to keep going back, right? The only way the community makes it is if we go back and continue to help, right? You help, you reach one and they don't hear it, then reach another one and another one and another one. Got to keep going back to make sure that there's paths out for that community. And we have to kind of go back and invest in those communities, right? We have to learn how to start putting our dollars back into our communities to make sure that they start to get the resources that they need, right? I won't go off on a financial tangent on this one, but believe me, that's another Cocktails with Dave episode. We will talk about financial empowerment. That's something that I believe in fully, is understanding the power of finance. But we need to make sure that we go back and give those resources back, right? I think sometimes, again, in the community, in the African American community, we look, we look too much to these celebrities to go out and do things. People, why isn't Oprah doing this? Why doesn't Tyler Perry do this? Why don't you do it? Right? Let's stop looking to other people to solve our problems and solve our own. By rising up within our own communities and starting to do the things that we need to do. And that starts by us giving back. Again, back to that, to this kind of theme today is just getting involved in our communities and understanding what's going on and making sure that we are being a positive light in our own communities. We are being the cause of change and drive in our own communities, right? That's something that we have to start doing. And that's how we continue to evolve and push and kind of go through our communities and realize that we're not going to reach everybody, and that's okay, right? it's not on your shoulders as an individual to reach every single person. But if 10 of us go back, then we can do a lot more than one can. And then if 50 of us go back, it's more than 10. If 100 go back, it's more than 50, and so forth and so on. So definitely it's something that I think we have to start doing, is making, you know, more having more involvement in our local communities, giving back in the ways that we can, so we can start to make those connections and make a difference. So all right. We're coming up on 45 minutes. You guys have been listening to me just kind of go off and rant. This has been Cocktails with Dave, the live edition of Cocktails, Code, and Conversation. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm definitely enjoying this. I'm loving the interaction. Thanks, everybody, so much for tuning in, wherever you're tuning in at, and in the comments. So we're going to wind down here. We're going to do the segment that I like to call the last sip. All right. So one thing interesting, and I'll probably cut this out on the audio version of it. So yes, the audio will be recorded. I'm actually streaming this now to my podcasting platform. So this will go on the audio version. So make sure that you subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, please go check it out. Cocktails, Code, Conversation on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, for the C3 Squad members, if I got any out there, I've been talking about the merchandise store forever, and I want to let you know it is coming. Here's the shirt, right? So let me move this out of the way. So here's a view of the Squad member shirt. That'll be going up on the merchandise store here soon. And we'll be getting that up and running here in the next week or so. That's coming. I got some more merchandise coming there as well. And what else? I'm probably going to forget something. We got a question coming in from Terry. What do you think giving back should look like? Man, it would be whatever if you have a specialty, right? It's taking that specialty back to your community, right? So let's say you're an engineer, right? And if you're an electrical engineer, went to school for electrical engineer, you've landed a job as electrical engineer, you take that back. I mean, something as simple as going to, finding the, predominantly Black elementary schools or high schools in your area and going back for their career day, talking to them about what life's like being an electrical engineer. Maybe it's volunteering to the local, if they have like Boys and Girls Clubs or YMCA's, mentoring, right? Going back and finding, especially for African-American men, let's go back and mentor these young boys. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't have father figures around, or the father figures are going to find are the ones that we don't want them having, right? Go back and just spend that time. That was something that, excuse me. Okay, one of the good things about having a cocktail live, right? One of the things that I found really, really fulfilling when I was in college is my boys and I, we signed up for a mentorship program. We all had mentors or mentees, young kids that we go in high school and, just kick it with, really. And, I remember, a funny story. So my mentee, I sat down with him. He was a young man and a decent basketball player, but, knew that basketball wasn't really his thing. Had some friends that were into the drug life, and he felt like that was his path and where he would probably end up. And when I met him, he just felt like, hey, like, look, I'm going to do this, but at the end of the day, I'm probably just going to end up doing this. I'm probably going to end up selling drugs with my friends or whatever. And just sitting down with him on the days, helping him with his homework, talking to him, telling him what it was like going to college, what it was like going to North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, Aggie, right? What it was like being an Aggie, and learning different things in college, and the different experiences, and letting him know that he could do it, that he absolutely could do this, right? And he would say things like, well, my grades aren't that great. And I was like, hey, well, that's why I'm here, and that's why I have tutors. And so if anything, Terry, is just it's giving back and having a presence in our community, letting people know that there's other paths of what they may see around him. So that's one example there that I would say of giving back. And as I kind of close this out and close this down, I want to say a couple of things. Number one, to all the allies out there, right? So I'm going to go back to what's going on with the murders of of our Black men in this society, for all the allies, and to be clear, by allies, I mean people who aren't Black, right? You may be sitting there and thinking, like, what do I do? Or you may see some post from your friends on social media that may shock you, or you may be like, man, like they're really angry. Yes, they are angry. And if you're truly an ally, you need to give them that room to be angry and to express themselves. And now's not the time for fake words or this kind of. I appreciate. Whilst you may also be enraged, it's one of those areas where you, you kind of never will understand, but you can be there, right? So give them the room that they need to express themselves. Um, stand up, stand up for them in private, in public as well, right? That's the biggest thing that I think anybody can ask of their ally, right? Is don't say to me in private what you're afraid to say in public. Say it with your chest and say it loud for the people in the back. And then I would say for my people, I know we're hurting right now. I know we're angry, and I know that we want to take these things and find ways to retaliate or just make people understand. Take time to process those emotions, express yourself as you can, but get to a point where you can focus it back into your community and find ways to start to engage, right? If it's, attending your local, school district meeting or council district meeting, which is probably now all on Zoom and things like that, but just understand what's going on in the community. Start to make changes in your community first and be that beacon in your community. And those are the steps that I think we should take, you know, towards making this better. We have to remember that hate and violence aren't the answer. We've got to find love in all of this, right? Um, and we've got to come back to that feeling of love that we need to get to a place where we respect and love every human being. And we've got to be a really loud voice and an organized voice in order to get other people to see that for us. So that's what I'll say on that. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We will keep these going. I will try. I'm thinking maybe once every month we'll do this live cocktails with Dave. This all came up because I'm currently in the process of getting more interviews. There's going to be more guests coming on. I'm scheduling those guests right now. We're going to be doing a lot more live and video. So people have been asking, and so we're going to do more live video. I've got it set up to do that now, and you'll be seeing a lot more of that coming. So D1, if you're still out there, you finally got the video, bro. Like I got you, man. We're going live, we're doing video, doing interviews. I appreciate everybody's support. Please like, rate, subscribe the podcast on whatever platform you listen to. Sign up, head out to the website, iamdavidlee.com/podcast. Sign up for the C3 Squad so you can be one of the first to get your C3 Squad shirt. So once again, for all those that are watching right now, this is the squad shirt. It's got the cocktail glass on there, right? Those will be coming out. Have all the different sizes, and there's going to be more merchandise coming as well. We've got some customized shot glasses that'll be on there as well, so you can enjoy a cocktail as you're listening to the podcast. So I'll sign off with that. Be safe, everybody. Remain socially distant. Find your peace in all this. My people of color, my Black people, find your peace, right? Express yourselves, find your peace, find your way. If it's meditation, if it's prayer, if it's just talking it out, if you just need to call someone and scream and cry, whatever it is, but find your peace and then move forward. Let's not carry that anger forward. Let's turn it into vigilance, and let's turn it into getting back, to our communities and making sure that we let our communities know that we will no longer be silent and allow these things to continue to happen. So with that, we're going to be signing off. Take care. We'll see you guys soon. To the next cocktail, to the next conversation.